Welcome to the Sense of Soul podcast. We are your hosts, Shanna and Mandy.
Grab your coffee, open your mind, heart, and soul. It's time to awaken.
Hey friends, if you are looking for ad-free Sense of Soul episodes, you can find them at Sense of Soul Patreon. Become a monthly member at any level.
You will also have access to our monthly SOS Sacred Circles, our mini-series, merch, and much more.
And it's a great way to help support our podcast so that we can continue to bring you inspiring episodes twice a week with our enlightened guests from all around the world. Check out our Patreon.
Today we have with us Sherry Stirling Fernandez. She is the author of the best-selling book, Life Mastery, Personal Progression Towards an Infinite Potential. Sherry has been a student of personal development for over 40 years, and what makes her program unique is that she practiced and refined the life mastery principles taught for decades before deciding to share with others. And today she's joining us to share how we can work towards our infinite potential. Welcome, Sherry. It's so nice to meet you.
You too. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you at?
We're in Idaho. So where are you at?
Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
I'm originally from New Orleans, but I've lived here most of my life, but I still consider New Orleans my home. I would love to move back, but I have a bunch of Colorado-born children. Actually, so maybe you can help me get there because
I probably could help you do that. That's kind of my specialty.
I know. And I think that's awesome because, one of the things being from a Southern family, like being a mom was my identity for sure. So even thinking about, what I would want was something that, I only really did recently. I'm not just a mother, but if you would have asked me, Shanna, what are you good? Actually, someone did ask me that probably about 10 years or so ago. A therapist said, what are you good at, Shanna? And I was like, I guess I'm a good mom. And that's just kind of all I had. Yeah. But I'm good at a lot of things. I've spent much of, the past decade discovering this.
Well, Shanna, this is my expertise, right? And I help people build big dreams and things, but I raised 6 kids. The thing that being a mother is still, you won't do anything better than that. We always like, well, yeah, but what else? Yeah, but what else really matters? I mean, do other things for sure.
Wow. Oh, for sure. But they end up being my greatest teachers. My children.
Oh, right. You can't you can't get more personal development than being a mother. And the opportunities for personal growth, if you're not chained to a full-time job, it's more difficult, but the opportunities for personal growth, if you're raising children, I couldn't do what I do today if it hadn't been for all the things I learned and the opportunities I had to do it my own way when I had children. So
yeah. Oh, I love that you said that. 6 children.
Yeah. And people say, well, yeah, back in the day, but I'm going to tell you, back in that day, that was the Now generation. Remember the National Organization for Women, and they were militant, raising kids or staying home with kids. There was more pushback then than there is now. Now we're a little more like, just do your own thing. Mm-hmm. But back then it was really kind of like somehow we were not being true to womanhood if we were staying home with children. It was a bit of a fight.
My mom was totally traditional. She stayed home with us. She never worked.
Which is good too. So fortunately we can have it all. And the other thing, how old are you, Shanna?
I'll be 47 in May.
Oh, you're the same age as our oldest daughter. I raised kids for a really long time, but I've reinvented myself a number of times since then. There's so many lives that you can still have. Mm-hmm. I've owned a business. My husband and I owned several businesses, and one I ran the fitness business for 9 years. I've done a lot of things, and then I wrote the book. I've been able to do so many things. So you can have it all. That's how I got into this. Is I just figured you can have it all, and I was going to figure out how to do that, and I did, and I do.
What was your childhood like, or what was your role models like? Your mom and grandma. Like
I had the kind of upbringing where you say, I do not want the marriage or any of the marriages my parents had, and I don't want to be the kind of mother my mother was. So that was the kind of upbringing I had. My parents were divorced when I was little, and they each married somebody else, and then they divorced them and married each other, and then they got divorced each other and married other. It was like that. I don't know if much of the book that you read, but I graduated at 17, and then I just sort of hit the road and was it was a hippie era, and it was sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that kind of stuff. When I got married, I decided Ken and I both just partied away our years between high school and then again, I graduated a little bit early. So between high school and the time we got married, and then we get married, and I've already got one child. And I had to quit drinking because I had the drinking problem. I quit drinking when we got married or right after. And then we went to town on ourselves. We decided, okay, we got to make up for lost time. And I decided all the things that I wanted in life. And we had another baby not too long after we married, about a little over a year after we got married. But I thought, if I'm going to have these babies, I want to do that and still be able to have a great body. I think I can have it all. Uh-huh. And I missed education, formal education. And I'd been a debater in high school. I mean, I got a pretty good IQ and good mind. And I like education, but I missed it, right? So, but I wanted it. And not formal necessarily. I just wanted to know things. Yeah. And I wanted a spiritual life. And I wanted enough money. We were so poor. Like people talk about being young, married, poor people, but we were way below. We were so in such bad shape. And I wanted enough money that I had any freedom. I never had to think about money to do anything I wanted to do. I wanted that. So I wanted a lot of things. And I figured if anybody could do it, I could do it. And so I went but I just had to find out how. Ken, I don't think we realized this until after we were married, but he really felt the same. Like once we settled down, we realized we both felt like we were really destined for something great. We just had to figure out how to make it happen. And we did. We just started reading the motivators and the people that taught how to set your goals, mostly motivators. Ken had a goal when he was younger, and then it resurfaced after we got married to be a millionaire by the time he was 40. So we were really way behind. way. I just like paint a picture about how poor we were, but I don't think we knew how poor we were. We just so dumb. We were a little bit behind, but we did make that goal pretty close. I think he was 41, and we valued our assets, and we were at $1 million because we had applied. We were both learning and principles for personal development, and we were applying. And we're still having kids too, right? So we're having these kids, and as fast as we can still do it and have the kids and make life work, we were learning and growing.
And there goes the money.
And now it's all those things.
You have the kids.
I have all those things, even more than I wanted. Like I'm 67, I still look really good in a bikini, and and we have all the money. I don't have to worry about money at all. And my family, and also the thing about marriage too. After those bad marriages, I got married mostly because I wanted stability for my daughter. And I thought marriage is just one of those torturous things you just have to do in life, And then, but I thought, if I'm going to do it, have the best marriage ever. And we certainly do. I don't see any marriages. We have the most just lovely, passionate, warm, close relationship. And Ken would tell you the same thing, just so you know. It's not just me. We would tell you the same thing. We have a very sexy, romantic, wonderful marriage. And so anyway, I did get all those things. It takes time. But I believe anybody can have those things if they want it and they believe they can have it. And then they apply the right principles. You have to apply the right principles. You can't just, I said, one gal that I know said, I think it was on Facebook actually, said, I'm visualizing. She believes in this visualization, which I do too, to a point. But she said, I sit on my couch every day and visualize money dropping into my lap. I thought, good luck. Good luck with that. But you can, if you can have a vision for yourself and then move towards it, you really can do just about anything that you want to do.
I don't know how far your kids are. Having 6, there's probably a lot of years. My oldest and youngest are 15 years apart. I'm a totally different mother. So I relate to what you were saying, how, you've kind of been several different versions of yourself over the years. When I look back and see what I was trying to be, some version of like a good mom and a wife and all these things, or what I was actually modeled as well. But, I didn't fit in the boxes, and I think that, nobody really fits in.
Yeah, I was just saying, nobody fits in the boxes. We always think, they're the perfect this or that. And everybody thinks, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say a contradictory thing too in a few minutes, but everybody thinks they're on the outside too, looking in. It's interesting that they think everybody is in this group and I'm the odd one out at church or in their whatever they do, and it's so interesting that everybody feels that way. Now, the thing I would say it's contrary to that is I worked hard to be the person that was on the outside. As far as I was going to do it my way, like the song. I think not having role models and not having any mentors, I went to I think it was 13 schools before I settled into my junior high and high school years.
Wow.
So I didn't have any mentors, and I was a thinker. So I just thought, what's the way to do this? And I just did things my own way, which has served me really well, but also serves my clients and the people who read my book because I didn't have to be locked into another way of thinking.
Okay, so you didn't have any role models as for like, what a good maybe, household maybe look like or whatever. However, you did mention that you were maybe studying and reading, other people who were putting out there some good stuff on self-help or who were these teachers?
Yeah, that's really a good point, Shannon. I felt like I was really ungrateful to not say that. There was nobody at the crossroads for me, and I was a little child in a precarious situation because my mom was divorced, my mom was remarried, an alcoholic. There's all the stereotypes that go with that, and I was 8 years oldish, like around that. So there wasn't really a person there for me. And my parents loved us. There was 5 of us. They loved us. I was the oldest, but they weren't present, if you know what I mean. They loved us, and we were our basic needs cared for, but there was no interaction to speak of, very little of that. But those mentors, like the first book I picked up off my mother's coffee table, and figured she was going to read it anyway, was Zig Ziglar's See You at the Top. And actually I'd read one in high school because I always had an interest in what makes the world tick and how do things work. I read I'm Okay, You're Okay in high school. So that was but that was a different era. So I did that one. And so Zig Ziglar, Wayne Dyer was extremely important to me. And a lot of my thinking was influenced by him. Totally huge fan. I didn't find him till a little bit later. I don't know where he was. I couldn't find him sooner, but Jim Rohn, I would have gone anywhere to listen to him speak. But by the time I found him, he died somewhere around the time I discovered him. Jim Rohn, huge influencer on the way I speak and teach. Brian Tracy, Hiram Smith, and then lots of people. And Earl Nightingale has a great recording called The Strangest Secret. Good on YouTube now, but for years, Ken would give it away to anybody that was all interested. It's a short one. But that had a lot of, Earl Nightingale, that had a lot of influence on me. And they helped me be able to weed out the pretenders, if that makes sense. These were people, they did something and then they were successful at it, and then they taught it, right? They didn't go out and say at 19 they're going to be a life coach and now off I go, right? They were people who went out, were successful in the world, and were also honest about where they were not successful. In the areas that they may feel like they felt. Jim Rohn especially is that way.
That's how you reach people, though. I've been there. Yeah. I'm kind of wary of the ones that have it all figured out.
And the younger they are, the more they have figured out.
Of course.
They may be unpopular probably, but I'm not a big fan of Tony Robbins, and because he just picked up from Jim Rohn and just started teaching people how to live, and he got better at it with time. But his own life was a mess. If you want to tell people, if you want to be a teacher and a leader of people, if you want to teach people, you got to have lived what you're teaching first, in my opinion.
Yeah. Life still has its ups and downs. Recently, I had this little dip over the past few weeks that I was very shocked, that I heard those loud voices again. And I'm like, wait, where did you come from? And I got sick. So, it was like my immune system was compromised. And I just had to be super honest with myself and dig back into my tools. You have to be able to have a toolbox to be able to dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. And have your toolbox, but you're going to find too that the more you do the kind of work, that personal development work, you're going to have fewer ups and downs. Especially, I don't know if I assume you're doing some kind of meditation, but especially meditation work, is you can learn more to just, and it's a long, slow process. Anybody who's making great strides and having marvelous visions when they're doing meditation is not doing the right thing. It's long, hard work, but the more you do it, the things don't get you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can stay in the moment and then things don't get you. And then part of that's getting older too, but
right.
And your kids, I assume, I also had 15 years between my oldest and my youngest.
You do? Yeah. So
we had 4 and then we had a space, then we had 2 more.
Like my co-host Mandy, she's not podcasting with me anymore. She decided not to return. And I had these voices going, you can't do this by yourself. You're going to fail at this. And I cried, and I really felt that was true for a minute. Thank God it was just a minute, but I was shocked that it returned in the way that it did. And I got sick. Like I said, like it literally made me physical, like my body reacted to this old pattern that returned, that this old Shanna that I hadn't seen in probably a decade. The next day I meditated, I cut cords, I put protection around me, I connected back with my soul. I put, that other Shanna in timeout, and I returned actually even stronger, knowing that I can do it and that was a lie.
Yeah, that's a super, just such a mortal human experience, isn't it? You can stand back and observe it and be interested in it. And look how I feel like that. It doesn't have to undo you. It sounds like it sent you down that old rabbit hole that you've been down before. But I will tell you, you will go through that again. I'm about, well, first of all, I learned that nobody's as competent as they seem. In that, with that respect, I'm probably about as competent as people get, and believe in myself pretty well. But when I wrote the book, when the book came out, Life Mastery, that's my book, Life Mastery. When it came out, it was in 2021, July. So I turned 66 that year. Yeah, 66 that year. So I'm thinking, you know what the voice was in my head? I'm too old to be doing this. Like, nobody cares when you're, this is a younger person. They're building careers on their books. That's why people write most of these books. That's why they're so long, by the way. They got to save some information for the next book. I didn't have to do that. But I had the voices in my head too. And you just get better at dealing with them. But you get just new levels. It's just new levels. I do have a book. If you've not come across it, you might like. It's kind of light and easy, but good listening, is by John Acuff, called Soundtracks. And I recommend that one to my clients a lot. Those voices in your head. He just kind of deals with that. A lot of what you're talking about. It does it in a kind of humorous way, but I teach daily written affirmations, not like standing in the mirror and saying, oh gosh, you're great, but things you really want to achieve that you write repeatedly over long periods of time. Well, I added, and you'll appreciate this when you get to that, especially being X generation or whatever. I think this is probably your generation, but my life is dope. And I would just be so amused every time I would say that. So I got that out of the book. And then I have two people. One was one of my clients and one was my niece, who I recommended the book to, and came back and said, in my daily affirmations, now I'm writing, my life is dope. I said, me too. It was fun. So anyway, it's a fun little book, but my clients have really, everybody that I suggest that to has really glommed onto it and got something useful out of it.
Talking about affirmations, it brought me back to Wayne Dyer. I had heard him say one time, if you wrote your affirmations and put them by like your alarm clock, when you first look at it, you're kind of in that in between awake and asleep. So you're in that theta brainwave. And so there's no rejection. So you actually, in that moment, when you first see that affirmation, you're actually receiving it. I just thought that was so amazing. And it's something that stuck with me. And I always suggest. I'm fascinated with the mind, the subconscious mind and the consciousness. And I feel like a lot of times, getting to really know truly how your brain works, how the thoughts work, and when we're present with ourselves. I mean, and we're so busy, when you just stay on that fast track. It is hard to be a mother raising lots of children, or even just one, or even none. We keep ourselves very busy in the world.
Yeah, we certainly do. I used to say, you have to be a mother. You have to learn how to talk on the phone, hold the child on your hip, and stir the soup all at the same time. The mindfulness thing is being able to think one thing at a time, do one thing at a time. Then you got to go back and unlearn all of that, so that you almost do that for survival.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I became such a good, half-ass multitasker, I would say.
Yeah, recovering. Have you heard of Dr. Carolyn Leaf? Have you read anything by her? You're fascinated about how the mind works. I listened to her speak at a leadership conference in Florida last spring, and it was just like, I was just blown away by her understanding and depth, whole new level of understanding the brain and how it relates to mindfulness. She has a book called, I also recommend, and everybody does, it's more work, way more work than the other one. You have to read this one because it's too difficult to listen to, but it's called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess by Dr. Carolyn Leaf.
Heard of that.
Super good. And there's the mindfulness part in there, but she's done studies, and she'll show, she was at this demonstration, she held up this plastic tree short, like tree in a pot. And she said, this literally looks like your thoughts in your brain when they're healthy. And then she had this old withered, ugly one. This is what they look like literally in your brain. So in the book, she shows you pictures of the brain waves and the different things and just the science. So
Yeah.
what she's doing is she's combining the science and mindfulness, and they're just like, it's super fascinating.
I call that mess clusterfuck in my brain. Is what I call it.
You may remember Wayne Dyer saying this, but he said, well, let me first back up and say this. When people feel stuck, we all know that being stuck is miserable. Unhappy is stuck, right? I'm stuck, or usually we're not stuck, we're backsliding. And we're miserable and we're unhappy. And we know that this is true of being stuck or being backsliding, because there is no stuck, there's forward or backward, right? But we think we're stuck. The opposite is also true. We are happy or when we're moving forward, and everybody longs to be happy. I'm getting the Wayne Dyer thing here. That's his, I mean, any religionist, any philosopher, any thinker of any kind has come to the conclusion that the number one thing as humans that we want is to be happy. Even when we do things that will make us unhappy, we do them thinking somehow this time it will make me happy. Whether it's a bad relationship or eating chips and binging on Netflix. At the moment, we think maybe this will make us happy, right? We do everything because we think it'll make us happy in the long run. So now to Wayne Dyer, and I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but he said that we long for peace more than happiness. My thinking is that it's almost the same thing. I mean, they're so closely intertwined that it's splitting hairs. And then if I just say this one thing for anybody listening, because one thing I know about people is they can listen to a conversation like we're having, and they're thinking, people think I'm so far from that. I will never get there. I've got to get to where Shanna is. I'm way over here with all this anxiety and beating myself up, and I want to be like Shanna. I just can't get there. It's so far from me. That all you have to do is make little steps towards what you want, little steps forward, and the happiness comes and the peace comes. You don't have to get where Shanna's at in her journey to have the happiness that Shanna has, right? And then those steps multiply and they start building really rapidly. So if anybody's listening to this podcast that feels like they're stuck, I would just say pick something. It doesn't have to be meditation. Just pick something. It might be brushing your teeth. Who knows? I've had clients where they started right that far. Pick a daily thing that you can do every day and just start moving forward in it. And then when you've got that down, kind of feel comfortable, move, add another thing, and you'll be amazed. Because if happiness didn't come till we arrived, none of us would be happy, because guess what? Nobody arrives. You haven't arrived. I've not arrived. I've been at it longer than you, and I've not arrived. We're not going to meet this potential that we have in this life. So when they say, it sounds trite and it's been said a million times, but really, truly, happiness is in the journey towards our potential. Now, we do have to be moving forward towards our potential. We can't do a journey that takes us down a bad road and expect happiness out of it. But if we're moving forward to what our potential is, the amount of happiness unlimited, and it can't be shaken. This is real, true, inside out happiness.
When you said what Wayne Dyer had said, what does happiness look like for me? Well, happiness looks peaceful.
Yes, certainly. That's why you can't hardly argue with him, right?
Right.
It feels very peaceful when you think about it.
It's like there's a stillness and a freedom from things, right?
Freedom from all that garbage out there.
What would you say is reaching that infinite potential then? If we can't even reach it here, what is the finish line?
What is the infinite potential?
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of ways that it's been expressed. We're not going to reach it in this life. We're not going to. I would say, from my perspective and from my ~language in my world, I would say it is to be God's ourselves at some point in the ever far distant.
So evolve.
Evolve to the point that we are, and it says, in the New Testament, you've been called God by God gods. You've been called you gods or whatever. That should be gods. Right. I think this is a truth. However, I don't know exactly what that looks like. Nobody does. But when you think about, like, we taught SMART goals forever. A lot of people did. I didn't. But people taught SMART goals. I do not teach SMART goals. It's not a good way to live, because it brings down your goals to something very ungodlike or very unprogressive. Like, they have to be so little to be a SMART goal. Right. If you think about what do you ultimately want in any area, financially, you can't really almost describe it, right? I want freedom. It's not a dollar amount. I want this, but you know what it feels like. But to actually describe it to somebody else is very difficult. Even our fitness level, I know what it feels like. I want to be lean and I want to be strong, but I can't really describe to you in detail what that will really look like. Any of the 8 areas that I teach, your character, what kind of a character, what kind of an integrity do you want to have?
Right.
I know it when I feel it, but I can't quite describe it to you. I want to be honest, of course. I want everything that come out of my mouth to be actually as it is. It's really hard to define. So my point is, those are infinite goals. They can't be tied down. That's our big goal. Now we set little goals between here and there, ideally in 90-day increments for the most part. 90 days, for 90 days, I'm going to do this thing. This is going to get me a little bit, just a little bit closer. And at the end of those 90 days, I'm going to regroup, maybe continue with the same thing, maybe change it. Say it's a workout. I'm going to work out for 45 minutes, 4 times a week for 90 days to get me to this fitness goal that I want. My business was a fitness business, so I use a lot of analogies for it. So then at the end of 90 days, I might say, rather than do this little doodaddy thing I'm doing around at the gym, I'm going to actually take these classes and I'm going to do it 5 days a week for the next 90 days. At the end of that 90 days, I might say, I think I'm going to incorporate 1 day of yoga and 4 days. You see what I'm saying? That 90-day goal will evolve. It won't be the same for forever, but every 90 days we regroup. We still have the habit of working out. We change it up. And whether it's a spiritual thing, maybe I'm going to start with mindfulness and I'm going to start with 10 minutes, maybe start with 5 minutes of mindfulness. And then the next 90 days, I'm going to regroup or maybe I'll try a different kind of meditation the next 90 days. But the habit stays, the meditation stays. And if I keep meditating every day for the rest of my life in some form, I'm going to get closer to my spirituality goal. If I work out 5 or 6 days a week for the rest of my life, I'm going to eat a certain way the rest of my life. I'm going to have these goals. I'm going to change them up, but they're going to be the habit is going to remain. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. In fact, it reminds me of, I was in this boot camp and Randy Spelling was doing a talk and he said, it's really hard if your finish line, is way out here, like make small ones. So I was thinking about that when you were talking. I saw a finish line at the end of the day for maybe, your meditation and whatever you had to do, or for the week for this, and just keep moving your finish lines up a little bit. When you think that it's such a long road, you do get exhausted because you're trying to meet these conditioned outcomes that are actually not yours.
That's going back to what I said to these people who might look at you and say, I want to be like her, but it seems too difficult. All you have are little steps. Nobody can get to anywhere except little steps. That's all there is. Now you can take them a little more rapidly maybe, or a little slower, but you only have little steps. And especially with our social media world and where we have instant gratification is sort of a thing, we just think, and it sounds like people are just, I was over here, now I'm way over there. That you don't see the steps that people are actually taking for real change. If somebody changes very fast, it's not a real, I've never seen it. If somebody changes really fast in some direction, they still have to go back and do the back work. There's like no other way.
Diets. Those quick diets,
it's like a diet, right?
10 pounds quick.
Yeah. Or now I see on Facebook that you can buy these pills and you can lose all of your belly fat in 2 weeks.
Right.
So that would be, so we all know that won't work.
For a wedding once, I had to fit in this dress. I did. It worked.
That's not real change, is it?
The night I put it back on.
And you're always going to put it back on because it wasn't real change. That's the problem with the diet. There's no real change. You did a thing for 12 weeks, but you didn't change. And so we don't want to do a diet in life. We want to do it this steady every day.
People are afraid to change, afraid of change. It's the one thing that hit me over the past, that change put me in fear, oh my God, I don't want to have to change, everything's going good. I don't want to bump in the road. But, I think that I've never, ever looked back and said, God, I wish that didn't change in my life. No, it was part of the metamorphosis of who I am. And, I've learned to not stay in the suffering, but, appreciate those boulders that came at me when I was hanging on the cliff.
I know I'm on a roll with this, but Ryan Holiday has a book. It's my 3rd book recommendation. I should get a kickback.
I know.
Ryan Holiday has a book called, I love all his books. Yeah. And he has a book called Obstacles the Way. And this is actually scripturally and philosophically a truth that's been taught by all of the great teachers from Buddha to Jesus to everybody. But it's the things that, it's the obstacle is the way. It's the bumps in the road that get us really where we want to go. Without any bumps, like somebody said, I can't remember who it was, if you find a road without any bumps in it, well, without any obstacles, I mean, how they word it, it probably doesn't go anywhere, right? It's not only is it, they're required to make progress. The bumps are, because that's when we really grow the most.
Slow ride, take it easy. You know? Because really, if you go slow through life and you're present and aware, then you have options when you get to a bump in the road, rather than going steam ahead, not paying attention, and end up with your car jacked up.
And it's an old quote, I think it's Viktor Frankl, and he said, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space, it's our power to choose. Well, what does mindfulness give you? It gives you the power, that space between impulse, between a stimulus, an impulse, and the decision that we make. Mindfulness gives it that space. So it buys us a lot of time and saves us a lot of grief, which gets us down the road faster. So is it taking it easy? Well, that taking it easy attitude, not being stressed because nothing, those days when you're really rushing, you got so many things to do, and then you keep making mistakes. I mean, it's really a true thing, right? Yeah. And then it ends up being not a productive day, and you feel stressed. Right. But if you take it with a little bit of mindfulness, it seems like you're wasting time, but you make better choices. And that's like a daily thing, but it's also a whole life thing. My thing that I teach is now is intentionally, I don't use that phrase very often, but intentionally be planning my life. So I've got a plan. So the decision's already made, and I already know where I'm trying to go. And of course, that saves you a ton of grief too.
But what happens when the plan falls through?
Oh, they always fall through. that's actually, it was interesting.
Plan.
Anybody who does any they plan their days, just does a day planning of any kind, knows you have a plan A.
Give yourself grace.
And then it never happens. But if you don't have a plan, you have a really horrible day. Right. So if you have to have the plan has to be in place, but you have to have a plan and you try to follow it. But the plan is not going to go the way you think it is.
Okay. So it's the same as what we said about the infinite potential. You're not going to get that maybe.
You're not going to get there.
So,
but by planning, you go somewhere.
Right.
It's just like if you plan your day, you're going to have a better day, even if you have planned it with plan B or C. If you plan your life, life will take you its own way. But you're going to get a lot farther down the road and have a lot more of what you want by making a plan, even if you end up having a different plan. One of the things, though, I go back to 90 days. One of the things that's beautiful about 90 days, and even in business, they're teaching this. What used to be like have a 5-year plan. Now business is like have a 90-day plan. Right. And I think that EOS thing is really popular. My husband's been reading it too, but I think that's really set up on a 90-day plan. It's really hard for life to send you very far off course in 90 days. So I can say for 90 days, I can't commit to this for 5 years. I don't know what I can do in 5 years. But I can
you don't know who you'll be in 5 years. I mean, seriously. But 90 days, you're right, is reasonable, right?
Yeah. Yes. So one of the things, and these have been free on the last 3 businesses I've owned, which have been 2 coaching and 1 fitness. I made these free and available. They're simple. They're on my website, lifemasterinfo.com, and they're a tracking sheet. I call tracking sheet. I find one in my book right here. It's a little, I should have brought mine down. It's a chart, basically. I started in my 20s because I was so undisciplined. It was pathetic.
I need these tools. So I do have to rely on these kind of things.
Everybody that I teach this to, that I've taught this to, that I know of, that I've stayed in contact with, still uses this, at least at some degree. I've been using this for a system like this, or this one, for 40 years. And if I could just point to one thing that got me the farthest down the road for actual end results, is this. This is just a little piece from the book. Okay, good. Show. This is an actual copy of one of my tracking sheets I put in the book. But what you do is you put the things you want to do every day down here. Okay. And then the days of the week across the top. This is so simple. It's like a child's work chart, right? Right. And then the things I want to do. It's like a ready to-do list for the personal development. So then I have on I'm right now tracking 14 things. I just happen to count them. So, but don't start with 14. Start with 3. I've been doing it for 40 years, like I said. So more than that. So like my first habit I wanted to develop when I was young and married is I wanted to pray in the mornings. I just felt like my days would go better if I would pray every morning. And I wanted to write in a journal, and I wanted to read. I wanted to do a devotional reading. So those were my first 3 habits, which I still do to this day. And then I wanted reading. I wanted to daily workout. And that's one of the first things I teach my clients, to use a tracking sheet. You can use a tracking sheet effectively. You won't get blown off course of your goals. In fact, when I speak, one of my favorite topics, if I get to choose, is why systems are more important than goals. Because you have a system. I really believe New Year's resolutions are a real thing. I think people are sincere. We laugh about them, but I think they're sincere. The problem is they don't have a system. And so they forget the kids get sick and, you have to go into work early and pretty soon you forgot about the workout. And then what happened to my workouts, right? You didn't have a good system. This tracking sheet is one of 2 systems I teach. Other ones, written affirmations, that are just the bomb for making things happen in your life. And if you do it, you get a check. If it's not required that day, like I don't work out on Sundays, for example, or I only wanted to write my book 5 days a week. So I got a couple authors right now.
That you want to create a new habit to do. Yeah. And so then you're holding yourself accountable. And
your brain and your ego hates that blank spot. You will hate that blank spot if you don't get it done so bad. And I'll do it. And my clients always come back and report this too. I wanted to get my check mark. I wanted my check mark. And so you'll stay up late to get that check mark and get that thing done.
We have no problem doing the bad habits.
Yeah, they're the path of least resistance. So,
take that bad habit and you replace it with a good one.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that. Look, for example, sugar is going to kill you. I mean, we just got to get sugar out of your diet. We all know this. People are addicted to it. It's an addiction problem. Yeah. It's as addictive as any drug. Right. And that's why making people fat, sick, and unhealthy. And it's in every processed food. Just you can hardly find a processed food without it. Okay, so but whether we're used to it and we may be biological in us, in our DNA, that we like something sweet, especially after we eat. Okay, so if I just cut the sugar out, I'm going to feel deprived. Mm-hmm. But if I have a thing I can replace it with that I love, then I don't feel deprived. I eat a lot of very, very dark chocolate, like 85% cocoa. That's because I do have that desire for something sweet afterwards. Won't hurt my insulin response, won't hurt my weight. It's got nutrients in it.
It's what you're saying, but you got to have a plan.
You got to have a plan. Another thing we keep in our freezer are frozen berries. And I keep canned whipped cream.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of sugar in that, but they're mostly air. And then that canned whip with some whipped cream on those blueberries, that I'll eat. So you decide what you're going to not eat or what you're going to eat instead of those things. And you stick to that thing rather than just ripping it out of your life. Right. And with time, the desire for it will go down. When I first quit eating sugar, which was embarrassingly not as long ago as it should have been, I was 50. I was eating teaspoons of peanut butter with honey on it because honey doesn't do that. Weirdly enough, honey does not seem to perpetuate your desire for sweetness. So I was doing that. My daughter came in. She said, "Mom, do you know how many calories that is?" I said, "I don't care how many calories it is."
Yeah,
I'm getting
this isn't about counting calories, right?
I don't do that anymore. But for a few months, that was my thing, Yeah. So, so you replace that thing. When possible, some things should just be rooted out. You should just not do some things.
I mean, if you think about the habits, like, of course, everyone gets up and brushes their teeth, I get my coffee. I have all of these things that are ritual in my life. They're rituals, right? I do meditate as well. And if I don't have one of those things, I feel like I'm cheated. I'm upset. I didn't get this time to meditate, or I didn't get my coffee. I remember one morning I was trying to wake up peaceful, and I go downstairs and I see, frick, one of the dogs had diarrhea. I'm like, great. Yeah. And then I go to get my coffee. We're out of coffee. Someone drank the last coffee. I'm just like, okay, breathe, Then I get, it was really funny. It was the worst morning ever. And I just, you make that choice. If you're able to find a piece of just stillness within a moment, you can make a choice, because that day was crazy. It was like the second day of school. My son I don't know if he missed the bus or something. It was so bad that morning. And then I was late because I had to bring him to school because he missed the bus. That's what it was. So I had to bring my daughter up to the school. And I wasn't planning on it. I'm in my pajamas, no bra. And then when I got back in the car, I realized I had 2 pairs of glasses on, one on my head and one on my face. And this is how I showed up at my kid's school. It was a bad morning, but I remember this morning because it was a morning that I chose to say, you know what? I'm not going to let this be my day. Yeah. It's only 9:00 and I choose to turn this all around after I pick up all the shit.
Yeah. You can make, you to use that space, right? And you've made a different choice. And one thing you said that I like too, as you said earlier, you said, do you feel cheated if you don't get certain things? Some of your daily habits will become like that, right? That right now might feel, I'm not saying you, but people who are working on habits, well, I'll say me. If I'm working out, and if I was for some reason not get to work out, I'm not going to be, this important to me. And if I didn't, I would not be happy about it. And my meditation, I have to do it in the morning. I know because it turns into a nap in the afternoon. This has got to happen first thing. Once in a while, things happen first thing in the morning. And I had a day like that recently where it was, by the time I really could have, it was evening, and I just knew it was going to be pointless. And I was not happy having missed it. So what might start off as a drudgery can become something that you learn to love because maybe you love it because how it makes you feel. Maybe it's just a habit. I don't know. Maybe it's a lot of things, but what's my reading sometimes, and still sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to work out today, but I go anyway.
So this is why you need to plan then. And in your plan, you need to ask yourself, what do I want my life to look like? What does my happy look like? What does my peace look like? What do I want? Not what the world says it does, but what makes me happy and peaceful, and make a plan. Maybe even, do you suggest like writing down these things? Because how do you come up with like 14 habits? I know you said don't try 14 new habits, but how do you get there? You know what I mean? Because first of all, you have to drop all the conditions of the world, because just because, your neighbors have all these things and they say they're happy doesn't mean you will be.
Well, I start with, when I'm working with clients, we already know what we want ultimately, really, when we stop and think about it. And the nice thing about being human is we can imagine and use our imagination and feel what things. So I can look ahead and say, if my life was like this, how would that feel? And so I can do a visualization with clients. But also, this is a copy of Life Mastery. It looks like this, by Sherry Stirling Fernandez. On the back, this is me. This is me. It's only not a very old picture, but I'm going to put a new one on it because I want my hair to go gray. But that's another subject. But there's 8 areas. So I'd ask myself, what do I want my physical self to be like? Long term, and where can I start today? What do I want my spirituality like? What one thing could I do today, right now? What habit could I develop now? So what habit could I develop physically that would get me there eventually? I know it's gonna be a long time, but whatever. I've got the rest of my life, right? One thing, if I did it every day, okay, well, I might work out. I might give up sugar. I probably should do both. Spiritual, what one thing could I do? Maybe it'd be prayer. Maybe it'd be devotional reading. Maybe it would be whatever. It could be a meditation. Every day, I'm going to go for a meditation walk, maybe. What can I do spiritually every day for the next 90 days that will get me to that spiritual point? Relationships. What can I do in my relationships for the next 90 days that's going to get me that kind of relationship I want? Education, money, vocation, lifestyle. What can I do for the next 90 days that would improve my daily lifestyle and my character? What one little change could I make? Could I be what could I commit to? Now, not everything will fit on your tracking sheet. So that's why I teach daily written affirmations. Like maybe on my character, I want everything I say to come out my mouth to be totally true. That's a really hard thing to define if you've done that or not. So anything that's not definable, like that doesn't fit the SMART criteria, for example, in the 90 days, only used for the 90 days, then I put that in my affirmations. Then I would say, everything I say is exactly as it is. That might be my affirmation. Maybe I want to respond more kindly to criticism. On your tracking sheet, I wrote my affirmations. These are daily written affirmations. So now I track my affirmations every day too. So you could do the same. You like to put yours by your bedside and read them. I would still suggest you write those besides that, by the way. But then you could bet I reviewed my affirmations before I went to sleep, and you put that on your tracking sheet so you never forgot. Interesting thing, clients will come into me and I'll say, well, what habits do you want? Well, I'd like to work out. How much do you work out now? I work out probably 3 or 4 days a week. Then I'll sign them the tracking sheet and they'll come back and say, I was probably only working out 1 or 2 days a week. We're kidding ourselves about how much we really do. I do this pretty much every day. Well, when you start tracking it on that tracking sheet, you will be surprised that a lot of things you think I'm not saying you, but I'm saying generally people.
Then you're not making change, right?
And then you're not making the change. Then you're wondering why is nothing happening? Well, nothing's happening, honey, because you're not really working out 5 days a week, right?
This is temporary.
Yes. So then we track these habits. And if you know that you're working out is going to get you, I want more muscle and better cardio. I know if I work out every day, I'm going to have that, right? I don't have to debate it. I just know this will get me there. I don't have to have a time frame, a diet, a 12 weeks. I'm just going to do this every day for the rest of my life.
You don't have some short-term goal that says, I need to just lose 10 pounds, because that actually, there's an ending to that. Because once you lose it, you're not going to do it anymore.
And you'll probably lose your 10 pounds. And then in 10 days, you'll start gaining it back.
Because it's not
your goal is only to lose it. Diets are so damaging in so many ways. I can't even tell. I could go on forever.
It's
about
a mental,
damaging.
right?
The mental. This is what I hate most of all about diets. And this could be applied to anything that you do in a temporary form. But dieting is the ubiquitous one. It's a heartache that comes and the disappointment. You go on this diet, you lose this weight. Most diets work. I mean, they do work. If you do them, they'll work. And you lose this weight and you're like, oh, I feel so good. I'm so proud of myself. But you didn't change. And then the weight's going to come back on. And you probably didn't work out. So you probably lost a ton of muscle. So now your metabolism is lower. And you think it's your fault that you gained the weight back. You think, I'm just weak because I gained that weight back. I'm telling you from experience, I didn't get this under control it took me a lot of ups and downs for me to get this under control. You think I'm weak. I lost all that weight, and then look at me. It's not your fault. This was biological. This is a little while later, you try another one.
In order to evolve, right, to get to that infinite potential requires real change, a life change, right? The life mastery is actually accepting that you're going to change and morph and evolve through it all. And that requires a life change, not
a temporary. But remember, this is little steps. Okay, I'm not going to lose 20 pounds in 20 days or in 40 days, or probably I'm not going to lose a lot of weight fast if I do these things. Although I have a client that just gave up flour and sugars. I suggest people do when they want to lose weight. Lost 18 pounds in 3 months, just by the way. No flour, no sugar. That's the key there, by the way.
That's the thing, right? Like if we could mentally accept of why it's not good for our body rather than just the weight part. Because the weight part is so connected to I'm not comfortable with myself.
Yeah, I'm not good enough. Yeah. Truly. And they'll say, I turn down desserts all the time because I'm not saying I would never eat dessert at this point in my life. I could eat one if I chose. I almost always choose no. But the reasons we're like, oh, you're so good. Like, it's not a discipline for me. I know what happens to my body. I got the science behind it. I know both from experience and scientifically what is going on when I eat that sugar. So it's not very difficult. Plus, I know how I feel.
Wow, this is amazing. This sounds so great. No wonder why, it has been so successful, being a New York Times, Wall Street, USA Today bestselling book, because it sounds like the way you've explained it anyways is something I think that a lot of people can understand and receive. Because that's sometimes, the thing when you're talking about some of the self-help books and all that stuff, they'll just confuse the shit out of you because there's like all these different steps and am I doing it right and this and that, but this is more of your personal, this is going inwards for you. You're not telling people how to be, you're telling people to trust themselves, really.
Yeah, and a couple of things I'm really proud about the book is that were important to me. One is that I didn't teach anything that I didn't know to be true by my own experience and having taught it to other people. Lots and lots of other people successfully. Yeah, that was one thing. So a lot of books are written and they've done research to prove a point. I didn't even feel the necessity, although I think I do quote a few things in there, but I didn't feel the necessity. I already knew them to be true. And so you'll just have to accept me. But I've taught it and I've seen it. And plus it speaks to you. You know it's authentic when you read it. You just know it's true. That's one thing. The other thing is that I give you something to do. That was the problem I had with all my early reading is I'd say, okay, I'm motivated, but tell me where to start. I give you a starting point, and that's really the tracking sheets. Start here. Start with a daily habit. And write your daily affirmations. That would be the second one. Keep a list of all things you want to accomplish in 90 days. That would be the third one. So I teach those 3 things. I got a few other tools in there too for different things, but I give you something to do because while I was highly motivated, I was not trained at all. And when you motivate somebody and you don't train them, you just leave them more frustrated, right? So I'm really proud about those 2 things. I never planned to write a book. It never was on my to-do list. but I did. And I think it's been really well received and I'm pretty proud of it. So,
well, thank you for writing it. I think it's beautiful. And, you know, I think that as we get older, we just get wiser. So I think that you did a good thing at your age, right? I mean, writing a book at, you know, at your age is, I think, a blessing to us younger people. So not much younger.
It was enchanted. The one thing you can know for sure is there was no ego in it. I wasn't trying to build a career on it because I didn't need that. I didn't need the money. I could write what I wanted to write without having to worry about how it sold.
Yeah, you wanted to help other people.
And one of the thoughts was, and growing older doesn't necessarily mean you're getting wiser. You could get dumber. But I did feel like I had all this knowledge that I wanted to leave, you know, and I'm only working with, I value my freedom. We really travel a lot. And so I work with a limited number of clients. So I just have this handful of clients that I work with. I think at this rate, they're really good to share what they're learning to their people. But still, at that rate, it's going to be a slow go. So if I could share, I've worked my whole life reading, learning, studying, practicing. I wanted to be able to leave what I've learned. Yeah.
You know, I thought a lot about that lately because I've been studying the Gnostic Gospels and looking at scripture and stuff and thinking this is what they left behind, their wisdom that they left behind. And, you know, I think that as an evolving, changing soul that's trying to reach your infinite potential, what are you going to leave behind? So you're helping the younger generations. That's part, I think, of is that what we should do for the collective. When you find your gift, you give it away.
Yeah, so true. That you have an obligation. If you learn something, you may not want to write a book. Maybe it's not for everybody. But still, once you've learned something and practiced it, and you know it to be true of yourself and your practice, you really owe it to the world to teach other people. And I tell my clients that I still right at the beginning, you are going to learn a lot of stuff here. And you have an obligation as you learn it and prove it to be true to share it. And they do it anyway. But this is the obligation. We have an obligation to share what we know. And the faster we learn, the more we need to share. And that's just, that's how if we don't, we're just a suck on the planet. And it comes natural, though, I think, when you do something really well. My husband is a business genius. He's writing a book on business, too. It'll be great. But he helps other people. He doesn't care what business they're in. They could be competing with him. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. Well, look, he would still help them in their business because that's what we do.
Good karma. So tell everybody where they can get your book. Do you still coach?
I do workshops. So I prefer the workshops. I do speak. I do like the workshops because I've got enough things that I'd like to see people actually do, but I still do quite a bit of speaking. I do coaching, but mostly right now I'm promoting the book because I have my own goal. I'm going to promote the book until July, and then I'm going to give it a rest and work on my speaking and teaching. But I'm still doing those things. Workshops. I do love workshops, and I work doing in businesses or in personal groups, clubs, all kinds of things in different hours. I don't have a one set. I usually tailor it to do. The book is Life Mastery.
What's the pine cone?
It's a redwood cone, actually, which you wouldn't know till you got into it. Everybody thinks it's a pine cone, which could be. But it's because of the potential of a redwood. And if you've ever been to have you been to the redwood, Shanna?
Is that like in Monterey?
In Northern California.
Yeah, my brother
giant redwoods.
He went to college in Monterey, and we went driving around, and
So those buildings, like, I live in Boise, Idaho, and we've got a fairly good 17-story building. My husband tells me he grew up over there in the redwoods, and I've been there a lot. But he tells me I've no spatial building, but the redwoods, there are redwoods that are 3 times the height of that building, that 17-story building. They're just phenomenal. You stand below them, they're just like, if you stand below them and look up and just contemplate it, they have their own ecosystem at the top. It's crazy. They're so high up there. So people are like that. But the pine cones are only this big. The redwood coniferous cones are like an inch tall.
Oh, I didn't.
So here's the tiniest of cones is the biggest of trees. And so I like the analogy to human potential. I was listening to Joe Dispenza's book on becoming supernatural, but he was just talking about how the heart works. And then he said, and then this is where physics kicks in. And I just have this thought. I think all of the sciences, people say follow the science. The science has changed so much since I was a girl, right? You can't really do that. But the sciences, spirituality, all that thing is getting close. They're all getting closer to go. There's not going to be this science, the discology and thisology and thisology. they're all just blending together with spirituality to be one whole.
Yes. All the spiritual and all the religions are too, in
and
many
the religions
ways.
too. I'm very, very committed to my religion. But what I've acknowledged and realized is that truth seekers of spirituality, of truth, all end up at the same place. We think, oh, these people believe this. I've heard well-known Catholic priests teach doctrines that are not Catholic that I believe to be true.
Right.
Because when people are really seeking truth, they're all going to end up at the same place. It's just how it's going to be, because there's truth, and that's all there is.
So true.
There's a lot of thinkers right now, and I'm finding this even in my own church, that the meditation, which is not an Eastern practice, by the way, meditation it's been around since the beginning of time, meditation. Yes. But there's a lot of people who moving that direction and believe that it's a movement. And wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that change the world? I think so.
It certainly would. And, I think that one of the most beautiful things that I've seen in today's time is that we have the space to be this and do this, the opportunities and, to be successful and heard in ways that, all morning I have a side podcast, and right now I'm working on an episode of Mary Magdalene, and just, her story is so powerful for women today. She was one of Jesus's greatest apostles. They talk about the divine feminine rising. She's the perfect example of that, from someone who was just put aside and falsely accused and, for thousands of years. And now, we know. I'm doing a lot of research on it in the church. In 2016, Pope Francis says that he changed her Memorial Day to a feast, and now she is known as the Apostle of the Apostles. And and I'm like, good for her. Jesus didn't go and tell Peter, who denied him 3 times first, he went to her. She's obviously special, and she's a woman, and that was unheard of. Her testimony was cast aside and not even legal, I think. So we should see her for who she is. And so I think that, now is the time for women, and for all that have been set aside, to rise and be who they truly are.
Yeah, well, certainly, we certainly have the opportunity, by we, I mean all people. We have more, like you said, more time and freedom. And that's a gift. And I think it can lead to either a waste of debauchery and a waste of our lives, or it can lead to more time for personal development and time to think, and more thinking time, which is the ancients. Some of the ancients had that time. Then life got hard. We had a lot of poverty, and we had to feed ourselves. But
as long as you have some tools, right? Get into your toolbox.
That's true. It's just there's so much availability of knowledge, but then of course there's so much availability of false knowledge. So you just have to learn to do that discerning thing too. But
true. Yeah, that's actually my biggest message, is discernment. So again, tell everybody where they can find your book.
It's on Amazon. Of course, it doesn't exist if it's not on Amazon. I also have a workbook on Amazon. I just sent this week is a planner. I have a daily planner that gives you a place to track your goals, and it looks the same, has the same design more or less as the front. Life Mastery workbook is what it is. So that's on Amazon, and then it's on Audible, and the ebook is out there. So it's all available on Audible, Amazon. There's a workbook for setting goals. It's got tons of tracking sheets in.
Awesome.
It's got all the instructions on how to apply the things I teach. It's got a space to write all the things I teach in the book. That's the workbook. And I have a day planner, which is like a regular day planner, to-do list, calendar of your events, that. And then there's a place every day to write affirmations. And then there's a place for the monthly tracking sheet in it. Okay. It's awesome. It comes in a leather binder. If you'd like one of those, you can get hold of me at Sherry@lifemasterinfo.com, and I will hook you up.
That's awesome.
And now it's time for Break That Shit Down. Welcome to the Sense of Soul podcast. We are your hosts, Shanna and Mandy.
Grab your coffee, open your mind, heart, and soul. It's time to awaken.
People are wanting rights for that group that they belong to, or they don't like the political system, or they want whatever change you want in the world, or whatever change you want in your relationships and the people around you. There's one way that you can make a change, and that's that you change you. It's actually the only way. You want to make a change in the world, you work on yourself. Yeah, that's what Mahatma Gandhi said when he said, "Be the change you wish to be in the world." It's the only real way. You can do marches till the cows come home, but when you change, it has a ripple effect, and it changes the world. And so, you want to make the world different, go to work on you first.
That is so wise. I feel like I've been a student.
Well, thank you for having me, Shanna. It's been a delightful conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us today. We hope you will come back next week. If you like what you hear, don't forget to rate, like, and subscribe.
Thank you. We rise to lift you up.
Thanks for listening.